What's going on, my little one-ups, and welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is Metroid Prime 4, which is one that I'm incredibly excited for, and with there only being months away from a gameplay reveal, I wanted to do a video to break down the accolades of the games that came before it. What should be continued into this game, and what should be left in the past. So sit back, relax, grab a cocktail and some popcorn, and let's get her done. Now I'm going to list these games chronologically and give you a little taste of what each brought to the table. And I'm going to finish with a cognac and what we should expect from Metroid Prime 4. Now firstly, we have the legendary Metroid Prime. The game that started it all. It was a game that changed the way I felt about how FPSs could feel. And it was an odd feeling because Halo had done something very similar months prior. Halo played like a dream using two joysticks to control your character, while Metroid Prime took a more reminiscent to the past approach, playing more like a GoldenEye or a Perfect Dark than something more modern, but it added some twists to the flavor to kind of bring it to the next level of what those older games would play like. It used a single joystick to control your turning and forward and backward movement, and the second C-stick was actually used to change your weapons. Now I say this, but I don't want you to think that Metroid Prime had a lacking situation. I think it also played to the kind of gameplay that Metroid Prime brought to the table in terms of being one of the first platform first-person shooters, at least I had ever played. Platforming in an FPS was always clunky, and Metroid Prime successfully made it feel smooth. And I mean, the GameCube controller was just a marvel in itself. Nintendo had created, in my opinion, the greatest and most creative controller of all time. And a lot of games that Nintendo put out on the system were built around its uniqueness. Prime was no different. These controls, coupled with the platforming gameplay, made an incredible union. Samus felt like a smooth tank. There was a weight to everything she did. From jumping and traversing to looking down her sights where she had to grip her cannon to aim. Trudging through water had its own satisfaction. Other elements that immersed you in this unforgettable adventure shooter from a visual standpoint was that this game was one of, if not the first game, to feel like you were inside the suit. I'd never seen a first-person shooter quite like this. When Nintendo finally does something in VR, they better make this the first game I can play, unless 4 knocks it out of the park. Anyway, with the mask you could see all that you would expect from a shooter, including map and the different upgrades to your suit, none of which were more important than the one you started with, the scan visor, which unlocked so much of what the game had to offer. It gave you access to a lot of different information about the game, its lore, and the structures within, and helped you to paint a picture of the story being told throughout your journey. This game came out at a time when the only reading I did was during the summer, and that was because school told me to. But this game made me, and I loved it for that. It truly helped you to feel like you were investigating, which brought you even closer to her character. Finally, the sound in the game from start to finish was amazing. Every score in this game was great, but some are still ones that I like to just listen to this day, hence the background music. But not just the scores themselves, but the way it transitions when a serious fight is coming. Songs are great and all, but let's talk about the sound effects, because this is one area the game truly shines. There is an extra richness that the sound adds to the already flourishing areas. Everything from waterfalls to indigenous creatures sound authentic, which adds its own level of immersion, but Sammy's sound effects alone do an amazing job. The sound of each of her weapons are unique and cleverly designed, but I think one of the more satisfying sound effects is the thud of her footsteps and the way it changes depending on the terrain. You even hear and see the splash when walking in water. I can't stress enough just how immersive this game was, and even to this day when I step into it, it still allows me to remain in awe of what the GameCube was able to accomplish. Okay, I think I've squeezed all I can from Prime, but arguably it's still the greatest jump that the series has seen. Now on to Prime 2 Echoes. I thought I wouldn't have much to say about it, but this game subtly added to what the first brought to the table. And in my opinion, it was the best in the trilogy at creating that creepy Super Metroid vibe. The visuals, controls, and gameplay remained mostly unchanged, with an added light and dark realm mechanic and an ammo system for the corresponding weapons. Where the game truly shone through was the level of detail you could uncover on Aether and Dark Aether. In Echoes, you were tasked with ridding the planet of a force I won't name because I don't want to spoil it. This malevolent energy has all but destroyed one of the many species that the ancient Chozo interacted with, and I won't name them either because I don't want to spoil. So there is a much more in-depth plot in this game. Couple this with one of the most epic and haunting starts to a game in the franchise, and it's easy to see where this game had some one-ups on the original. But the real depth is found in the fallen inhabitants of the planet. Young, old, and the fit to fight are scattered throughout the light and dark realm. And through scanning, you find out many details of these gentle, sentient life forms. You even get detail as in depth as how long ago they died and what was the cause of death. For me, these are all the things that Echoes really did better than the original. Next up, I'm just gonna skip through Metroid Prime Hunters. It was a great game. I had a lot of fun with it. It was a simple shooter on the DS, had very responsive controls, and the main thing was traveling between planets was a really neat idea, something that they carried on later, and the multiplayer was fantastic. It had a great deathmatch-like situation, which is something I'd like to see carried on, but other than that, there's not much here. Now for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, arguably my favorite in the series. This title brought and refined a lot of what I loved about the Prime games. Firstly, let's talk controls. While Hunters had quick flinch touchscreen controls, the Wii's technology was able to bestow incredibly smooth and organic motion controls. Most gamers turned their noses to this because it wasn't traditional, and I will say Nintendo should have given options for a standard control scheme, whether it had been with the GameCube controller or the classic Pro controller. But I stand by the Wii controls as the best way to play the Prime games. I heavily recommend Prime Trilogy for this exact reason. The point and shoot gameplay alone makes it a must, but in Prime 3, there were even more uses for the motion controls, most notably with the use of the grapple beam. Having to thrust your nunchuck immersed you even further into the role of Samus Aran. Adding keypads, door locks, and even making Samus's ship interactive made these motion controls a very welcome addition to the series. Speaking of Samus's ship, while Hunters introduced the mechanic, Corruption perfected it. Not only could you move from planet to planet, but you could also discover and open new landing pads around the different planets, which gave an added richness to the experience. But it felt like you were actively evolving the layout of the game. The backtracking the series was known for became less and less tedious because of these multiple access points. This isn't where your ship's uniqueness stops. Corruption is considerably more cinematic than previous installments, and some of these scenes involved close relations with your ship. Whether it was finding power-ups or evading close calls, I found myself feeling more attached to my ship. For the first time in series history, I felt like the ship was an extension of Samus. It was a truly great feeling and an unexpected breath of fresh air. The worlds and their design from a visual and gameplay standpoint were top-notch. There was a bloom effect present throughout the game with varying degrees, but it undoubtedly gave an added weight to the atmosphere. Each planet supported unique themes, and each area was vastly different from the last, while carrying this theme, which gave each planet a flow and continuity I felt was even more immersive than the first two games. Don't get me wrong, I love the way those games flowed, I just felt that the changes in areas was a bit more stark. I feel that being able to focus on a singular planet design lent itself to a more rich environment. This is just a narrative on how Prime led to Echoes feeling more design victories, and the two of them made for Corruption's awesome look and feel. Finally, let's talk power-ups. Corruption showcased a stack-on power system, which on the one hand I liked very much, but on the other left me missing each changing gun. Your missiles became frost missiles, and each time you found a new weapon, that became the new standard, keeping all of the functionality of the ones that came before it, whilst adding the new aesthetic and feature. Each upgrade to your weapon came with a new secondary feature, like welding or being able to shoot through certain objects or enemies, and even had super effectiveness when coupled with certain visors. I don't want to spoil anything, but there are certain enemies in the game that are incredibly hard to kill, but when you get a visor that allows you to see certain aspects, those enemies become a one-shot kill. So it's really interesting how the items work together now, as opposed to having them all feel very separate. On to Metroid Prime Federation Forces. Let me start by saying this game was incredibly underrated. I put a lot of time into it. I will agree that its greatest flaw was its aesthetic, coupled with not so comfortable controls. But getting past this was not hard because the core game and what it brought to the table was brilliant. There was a bit of story fed to you, some of which involved Samus, but unlike the previous Prime titles, this one dropped you into scenarios on various planets as a Galactic Federation soldier in a giant mech suit that ends up making Samus look puny in size comparison. This game gave players access to a few more planets in the Metroid universe, but had a mission-based setup, unlike the rest of the franchise. You could choose to play solo or tackle the missions with friends, making for a more truly fun and engaging experience. The game also stripped almost every aspect of what made a Prime game, but it also wasn't trying to float within the same realm. Instead, the game sought to do something new in the multiplayer field, and in that regard, I feel it succeeded. I'm certain that this isn't the last we will see of this formula. Okay, woohoo! We are at the point of talking about Metroid Prime 4 and what I hope to see from this game. Now, as we gathered from what I said earlier, Metroid Prime 1 really was the greatest jump. It did the most revolutionary things, whilst I would say 3 and even Federation Forces brought new things to the table in terms of controls and in terms of gameplay that really took the series in a new direction. So let's start with visuals. I expect the world from Metroid Prime 4 because we're not on the Wii U, we're on the Switch, which is significantly more powerful than the Wii U, and I would have expected something great coming out of the Wii U if they had made a Prime game for that system. That being said, I really do believe that Metroid Prime 1 wasn't just about raw power. I mean, you go back and look at that game, and in comparison to something like Halo, in some ways does look better. You know, it has bump mapping and all these fancy techniques, really interesting lighting effects. It's one of the first games I ever saw God rays in. But the overall organic flow of the level design and of the game itself was what really lent itself to feeling more real. That, coupled with the being inside the mask, was what really helped it to set itself apart. So I want to see environments. I don't need to see the best looking game ever. Obviously, this is the Switch compared to the PS4. We're not going to get that. But what I know that the Switch is capable of, I would like to see a game that gives us access to more details. I'm not even talking about raw graphics. I'm talking about being able to run your cannon underneath a waterfall and have the water flow off of it. Little details like that. Walking through water and having little ripples for each foot. Maybe having silt that when you stand in it, it puffs up clouds of silt. You know, little tiny details like that. That's what really drew me into Metroid Prime, was just its little details. The sound effects are a big part of this as well. I want to hear everything. You know, I want there to be a sound for everything. I want the sound to feel crisp and amazing and authentic. When that water is flowing off your cannon, I want to hear that. If I smack my cannon into the water, I want to hear that. When I plunge into the water, I want to hear that. I just want to be overwhelmed by my senses in this game. And that does not mean toppest notch graphics. A big area that I didn't actually mention that I should have was the jump in AI in Metroid Prime Echoes. It was incredible how you'd get chased around by certain enemies. And that is something huge that I would love to see in Metroid Prime 4. It's just a very unique, because, you know, I don't imagine that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a massively open world game with hundreds of enemies to like, you know, like I don't imagine it's going to be like that. I feel like the formula is going to say somewhat the same with some extensions on certain elements. Maybe we'll have greater encounters in terms of fights, but I just want the focus to be on AI. And if you have to remain giving us 3 enemies or 5 enemies at a time as opposed to having bigger firefights, I don't mind. But I do want that AI to be smart, to do things that I wouldn't expect from AI, to really raise the bar on what to expect out of AI. You know, these are the little ways that I think that you guys can do your part to advance the genre. You can't do it by pure power because you're working with the Switch. I mean, by next year you will have the Switch Pro, so maybe you'll build it in junction with that. I don't know, but these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. Okay, so we've talked graphics, sound, and AI. Gameplay, you know, I would like to see more puzzles, more in-depth architecture, ancient architecture, things that feel alien and interesting, kind of make it feel more like an Indiana Jones or an Uncharted or something like that, but you're playing as Samus would be really cool. And even with the suit being a Chozo relic, I feel like it would be nice to be able to, say, scan some ancient technology or find a visor that allows you to scan ancient technology and apply that to your weapon systems. Having it feel a little bit more in depth than just killing a boss and finding a power-up or stumbling upon a power-up somewhere in the game. Like, I want certain power-ups to feel more organic, more hidden, more unattainable. Certain weaponry that you don't actually need to beat the game. You did that in Metroid Prime 1, I feel, with the secondary weapons, but I want it to feel more organic than that. That's a word I like to use. Controls. Controls are a big one because Nintendo's been screwing up with certain games on the Switch. It was a mistake that they've made with previous systems like the Wii and even the Wii U of telling people, this is how we want you to play the game, and if you don't like it, sorry, but you're gonna have to deal. People don't like that. And with the Wii U, you were getting a little bit better with it, with the control, you know, having access to other controls. And I mean, the Wii had it as well, but there were just too many times when you would tell people, hey, you have to play with these controls. Like Mario Galaxy is a prime example. I would have loved to have played that game with traditional, just normal controls. But you've done it with a couple games like Mario Party, which I understand. Personally, I like motion controls and I like the way Nintendo does motion controls, so I'm not worried. But it's always nice to give people the option so that you don't have someone saying, hey, I don't want to play this game, even though I want to play this game, because you made these controls like this. So I think for Metroid Prime, I would like a mixed bag across the board. Not just here's some motion controls and here's some normal controls like Doom and Wolfenstein, but give us something even in between that. You know, maybe give us motion controls that feel hopefully better than Doom and Wolfenstein. Then you give strictly traditional controls, no motion involved. Then you give motion control added to your traditional controls, and then even maybe have something that's traditional but has some light motion controls in it, kind of like Federation Forces, where yes, you still had to lock onto people, but within that lock window you had the ability to move your crosshair so you could shoot in the chest, shoot at the legs, shoot at the head. That kind of option would really help you guys in the reception of this game. Another big factor, and Federation Forces did this as well in a way, was having shots really matter. Federation Forces had 3 charging stages. The first 2 were good and, you know, did heavy damage, but the third one was devastating. If you could get to that before being attacked, you could see the variant changes as you would fire those different stages. So I want to see that. Definitely want to see that. I definitely want to see different areas being affected more. If you get a headshot, it means more than if you shoot in the stomach, you know, or even shooting at the legs, you know, to take them out, to trip them down, you know, like whatever the case may be. Make those bullets feel weighted, feel, like, you want to feel the power behind them. Oh, I forgot to mention this, and this has to do more with the graphics, is the lighting in the game. Progressively, Metroid Prime 1 had amazing lighting. As you would shoot her little peas down the corridors, you would just see this beautiful illumination of light. And 2 and 3 have it. 2 had it a little less, and 3 it almost like non-existent. I mean, it is there, but it's just not nearly as apparent, and I want that lighting to be a lot more vivid. And I mean, this isn't something I really wanted to bring up because this is kind of something that I have reserved in my concept for a Metroid Prime first-person shooter for whenever I make it to Nintendo. But I would love to see a finishing mechanic. You know, if you stun someone, being able to... And what's funny is I played Doom for the first time a couple months ago, the new Doom. Gotta give it to you, Bethesda, amazing game. But I saw those finishers and I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. This is how I imagined Metroid evolving in the first-person format in terms of maybe not the speed or the way that the game flows, but the way that she interacts with enemies. Not to say that I want it to be as brutal, but I just had these visions of her not only having a sprint button, but having the ability to environmentally interact according to context. So that is definitely something to think about. Multiplayer is a big deal these days, Nintendo, so I really think that you should, even if you don't do it for the sake of, say, competitive, do it for your fans so that they have something cool to play together. And I'm not talking about just, you know, deathmatch. Yes, I would like that element from Hunters, but I want something more, I don't know, expansive. Either breaking up Metroid Prime 4's levels into stages so that you can go in with 4 friends and do some damage and maybe change up the way that the enemies flow at you because you have 4 people, you have much more bullets, and, you know, maybe come up with a power-up system kind of like Federation Forces where you can put new mods on your guns and stuff. I think that would be really cool. But even playing through the single player with a friend, just 2 people, would be amazing. But I think that these are all multiplayer ideas that you guys should rattle around. And even if you release Metroid Prime 4 and for 20 bucks you add that as DLC, I don't know. Not saying that that's what I would love you to do, but if that's what it would take for you guys to consider it, do it. Give people the option, you know? I just think that multiplayer is a big deal and that people would appreciate that. I mean, they'd more appreciate it if you include it with the game. Maybe include one of those multiplayer ideas with the game, and then the other ones can come. I don't know how that would work, but I just think that there's a lot to think about with this game and what it should bring to the table and what we as fans should expect from it. I just hope that at the end of the day, the product that you guys bestow upon us is amazing. Anyway, guys, that does it for this video. It was a long one, and I hope you stuck through it. But I appreciate you all. I want to send a thank you out to all my new subscribers. I'm sorry, but my notifications haven't been like telling me who you are, so I can't like shout out by name, but know that I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, guys.
こんにちは、任天堂の岩田です。社長って傍から見てるとどうか分かりませんが、実際結構大変なんですよ。忙しくて大変な時にどんどんやつれていくと人は同情してくれるんですが、私は忙しいと太る方なんで、太れば太るほどなんか何も感じてないんじゃないかって誤解されてるみたいで、非常に不本意です。